Because Makado Dam, Shawanaka Dunjaba, Manadu Gaming. I welcome everybody this evening, the ones that are in the circle, the ones that would like to be. I offer my name as Water Woman, and my family are the Bear Clan, territory of my ancestors, the Shawanaka First Nation, and I live on the shores of the Great Lakes year-round. That's where I was born. And at this time of year, the renewal is beginning, even though it's cold one day, rainy and balmy the next day. And this morning we had snow again, and it was so peaceful. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking I should write my little journal about the snow and its hypnotic state. And I just got to thinking about it, and I do not nap through the day. I woke up 2.5 hours later. So that's how gentle it was and beautiful. But as we enjoy these simplistic things and the ability to go to the fridge and go to the bathroom and have a bed, have food, there are many of our relatives, brothers and sisters across the big water that are not in the same capacity. What they are showing us is dignity, strength. I watched the people as they were getting on the trains to take them across the border today. And I thought about how gentle the people were with their elders and the women with babies and children. They didn't get on, like the people didn't get on the train themselves without looking behind to make sure that somebody else needed that spot more than them. So these are reminders of that star world that guide us every day. And I'd like to say miigwech to our beautiful and sacred men for allowing us ethical space between our grandmother, the water keeper, and our grandfathers and his helpers that sit in the sky world with the fire bundles. And I'd like to say miigwech and acknowledge the people who carry those two places. They are very special and very sacred in the knowledge-keeping world. So with that, I would like to ask the family sitting in the circle today to bring in the spirit of your ancestors and our good thoughts to try and comfort the ones that don't have it today. Keep them strong. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Marilyn. So welcome everyone. This is our last evening session of the We Baba Mose Mamiwi program, Where We Go Now. And just a quick note before we kick things off, this isn't going to be our last session. We are going to have the live sweetgrass braiding workshop in early April. And that will be followed by an informal social. So there's a chance to kind of check in and connect with everyone as we wrap things up. And this evening is going to be a real treat. We've got Abraham.Francis of Akwesasne, as well as a wonderful panel of youth joining us, some of whom are participants in the program, so you may recognize some faces here. And before we do start the talk, just a couple of housekeeping notes. If you do have questions during this session, we are going to ask that you do post them in the Q&A rather than in the chat. So in the previously we have suggested either the chat or the Q&A, but this time we'll just be going with the Q&A to keep things straightforward so we don't lose your questions. And we will be addressing as many as time allows at various points in the evening. So we are recording the session, but because we are going to be having both a wonderful live talk and panelists and opportunities for questions, we really do encourage you to stick with us for the whole evening. And with that, those are all the housekeeping items. So it is my great pleasure this evening to introduce you all to Abraham Francis. Just a little bit about Abraham, just a little bit, because there's a lot more, I'm sure. So Abraham has a Bachelor of Science in Microbiology and a Master of Science in Natural Resources. His past experiences include community empowerment, engagement, and research with the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne and a variety of other community-based organizations. His master's thesis focused on applied research to develop a biocultural land stewardship strategy for existing and newly settled Native American land claims on the St. Regis Mohawk Reservation, Akwesasne. Currently, he is working for the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne Environment Program. Abraham, you have been doing a variety of things, so I think I've got even an outdated title here for you. But you are working in environmental science, right? Okay. You can tell us more as you launch in. This position allows him to develop and implement projects that are inspired and directed by community needs, as well as influenced by his research interests. And those interests are at the intersection of environmental studies, Indigenous methodologies, community engagement, education, health, social services, law, and cultural foundations as a means for empowerment and healing within Indigenous communities. And with that, I say, take it away, Abraham. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for that introduction, Joanna. And I think that is an outdated one. I don't even know.
You just can't keep up with you.
Yeah, I'm always on the move, y'all. I just keep doing it. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump right into it, you know, like Sego Sewa Gweko, Dahulu Shate Yungat, and then Wakatrono, Akwesasne Nued Dewaka Chalo. So I'm Abraham Francis. I'm the Environmental Services Manager for the Mohawk Council of Akwesasne. And so I oversee our services for the environment. And I get to incorporate my own sort of crazy into this process. And, you know, everything I worked on is all about like community-based participatory action research. And if you're not aware what that is about research that is directed by community and is all about creating transformative change. And so you listen and you just embody what's being told to you and then you enact it. So for me, I love that because I'll be honest with you, not many people are going to read my thesis or my community, but the way that I work, the way that I operate is all about incorporating that insight into the work that I'm doing, making it accessible, because academia isn't accessible. We all know this. It's a struggle. It's a particular language you have to learn. And if you're not well versed in it, it can be used against you. And so in particular, this presentation I'm about to give to you titled Negotiating a Third Space, Navigating Research Methodology Through the Haudenosaunee Teaching of Gaswenta is a celebration of that. It's resistance, it's a rejection of this unequal partnership, or not even partnership, unequal relationship that exists between Western science and Indigenous science. And I use that specifically because I feel, from my perspective, that calling it just Indigenous knowledge, it almost sort of removed it. I don't know, I feel like it promotes that unequal relationship. We were scientists. We've been scientists. We've been collecting this data for thousands of years. We've been creating methodologies that enact that data and pass that data on for thousands of years. And so this is really a celebration of that. And it's also a moment of my life. So I gave this presentation all the way back in, it was in March of 2018. And so about 4 years ago, I gave this presentation. And I never finished it. I never took it to the next level. And I hope to take it to the next level. But for me, the way that I do my work is very autoethnographic. And so what I learn in my life, the experiences I go through, the grief I experience, the people that come into my life, they're reflected in my work. And it's a really important tool for me to heal and process my grief at times. And this is one of those pieces. So I'm just going to share this with you. I think you'll probably experience a little bit of your own journey through academia and maybe find some empowerment through this. And I hope it helps you, because for me, it's about creating some weapons for people to utilize when they're in academia and they're pushing up against these boundaries. So I am going to open this. And so let's just, I'll do that later. All right. So negotiating a third space, navigating research methodology through the Haudenosaunee teaching of Kaswenta. And I want to thank everyone that made this possible. You know, Joanna, Emily, Martina, Chloe, just channeling this crazy into a space that brought me here today. And so I come from my own community of Akwesasne. I'm sitting in my bedroom and just surrounded by so much love. And I'm sitting in the joy of this peace that I've had this week, because I know that at some point probably going to get disturbed. So I'm just going to sit in this love right now, this goodness, this accomplishment that my life is right now. And also know that I'm connected to my people and empowered by them and directed by them. I'm all about community. And so with that, I want to draw our attention to the artwork by Alan Mikkelsen, a Mohawk, called The Third Bank of the River. He drew inspiration from the cultural teaching Kaswenta and Akwesasne's landscape. The piece consists of panoramic images of the four shorelines along the St. Lawrence that form the complex border of Canada, Akwesasne, and the United States. Ironically, this artwork is housed in the US port of entry. You can see it if you get pulled in, searched, and questioned. And this piece of work I've created is dedicated to my journey through depression and anxiety, and the love and support of those around me that help me find balance. In a meeting with one of my professors, Dr. Kareem Ali Kassam, he said to me, "I don't want you to be settled or at peace. If you don't have to struggle, how will you evolve? Comfort should not be the goal, it should be safety. Discomfort is necessary." These words were necessary for me to find the goodness in all my struggle with depression and anxiety. I am growing, and this presentation is a product of that growth. Now, I'm just going to take a moment of pause. I realize that this may not be the best advice, okay? Just acknowledge that. I am not about that life anymore. I do not want to struggle forever. I do not want that to be the goal for people. I want you to feel safe and happy and celebrated. I am looking forward to a future that I am no longer celebrated for how well I can take a punch. I look forward to the future where I'm celebrated by how kind and soft I can be. And so that's my goal. That's what I want for people around me. That's what I want to create. This life is hard enough. Let's not make everything else so much harder. So, I just want to take that moment of pause and acknowledge that piece there. And for me too, I want to take, as I've grown over these years since I created this presentation, I see my depression and anxiety as a teacher, a moment to pause, a moment of reflection, because it's in these moments of just my brain eating itself that I find some interesting insights. And it's also a reminder that I need to stop and I need to be at peace. Almost like my body is just nope, we're not doing anything. You stay in bed and watch Netflix all day. And that's okay. I'm not going to be mad at that. Sometimes my brain will force me to. And that is really an interesting realization for me. And so this is what this piece is all about for me. So my journey and inspiration. Who am I? I feel like I've found the answer many times over in my life, but it is constantly shifting and transforming. I'm finding peace with this process. One thing I know for sure is that I am a Mohawk man from Akwesasne. I celebrate this truth as a grounding part of my identity and informs all aspects of my life. However, it has not always carried a positive connotation. I carried a lot of shame about it. I was told when I left for university that I need to get out of Akwesasne and not come back. I felt like I was being thrown out. I had the chance to make it, but I had to leave my culture and community behind. The situation was further complicated by the challenges made on my identity by peers and colleagues, an outright denial of my people's existence. This was strange to me as my lineage was and is never challenged at home. However, it is still something that people like to assume about me. I can't be as native as I think I am because I have blue eyes and light skin, but this is all I know, and in a recent discoveries reflected by my family's lineage on the original roles of Akwesasne. By the way, blood quantum, we don't care. These critiques and comments produced a toxic environment during my undergraduate education at Cornell. However, this time taught me how to find strength in the foundation of my culture, and I finished. Unfortunately, I carried a lot of the trauma from that time. I was so angry at education. It left a bad taste in my mouth and carries a terrible history for my people. I came back from my graduate degree, grounded in my culture and feeling empowered. However, I had not renegotiated my relationship with education. I was afraid that I would lose the pieces of myself and culture that I worked so hard to collect. In the height of my struggle, I was provided a different interpretation of Gaswenta that allowed me to find balance in being here. Or there, it took a while. The Gaswenta, or the Turo Wampum, is a treaty that was created between the Dutch and Haudenosaunee. The purple rows represent the ship or the Dutch, and the canoe or the Haudenosaunee. These rows are surrounded in white, which represents the river of life, and has another meaning that is grounded in the three foundational principles of the Guyana La'agoa: peace, power, and a good mind. It was created between two consenting parties coming to a mutual agreement of respect for each other's autonomy and peaceful coexistence in perpetuity. I used this to negotiate balance for myself and my research. This was difficult as at moments I seen the world as diametrically opposed, although my thoughts were working from a Cartesian landscape. But my mentor pushed me to think in multiple dimensions. This third dimension seeks to find a space that respects the autonomy of each paradigm, Haudenosaunee and academic, and opens up collaboration or ropes of co-creation. These ropes of co-creation are strengthened by their materiality as a silver chain, based on the Covenant Chain, a treaty with British colonies. The silver chain requires constant polishing, which keeps it from tarnishing. Thus, the different paradigms must be in communication and polishing this relationship to keep it from breaking down. For me, I found balance through acknowledging that I am firmly rooted in the canoe. I'm not losing the pieces of myself and my culture that I worked so hard to collect. I'm only at Cornell to understand the language of academia and its tools. I will bring this knowledge back to my community to help in negotiating projects with academics. With this in mind, I will walk you through my exploration of an Indigenous paradigm on a global level and then draw it into the context specificity of my people and community. This will be followed by a brief summary of the tools that I draw on from the academic paradigm for my work. Finally, I will tie this together with myself and my research, in which I am carefully navigating the methodologies presented and applied in my research. So an Indigenous paradigm. Research is probably one of the dirtiest words in the Indigenous world's vocabulary. When mentioned in many Indigenous contexts, it stirs up silence. It conjures up bad memories. It raises a smile that is knowing and distrustful. It is so powerful that Indigenous people even write poetry about research. I start with this prolific quote by Linda Smith. I think we are all well aware of this reality. I think it serves two purposes. It is meant to draw attention to the painful relationship that exists and continues to be a source of contention with Indigenous peoples for the non-Indigenous scholars. Also, I see it as a call out to Indigenous people to create change. However, we must be keenly aware of the dangers in research, so we do not replicate them. Being Indigenous does not exempt a researcher from conscious awareness of the implications of their work. There are severe implications to the products of research. And yeah, oh, hold on. Yeah. So an example of the severe implications. I presented an example of severe implications from my own community, akwesasne. Our culture was dramatically affected by the environmental contamination from the factories along our borders. Initially, assessments did not encompass the reality of this impact beyond direct contact with environmental pollutants and resulted in a $500,000 fine. However, it was through the diligent work of many akwesasne that we were able to hold them accountable through a more holistic assessment and received reparations. Today, we were able to create programs from these funds, such as the akwesasne Cultural Restoration Program and others that provide many services to the community to address the outcomes of the environmental degradation or violence. Linda Smith situates her paradigm within the Maori context and draws from this to inform her research. Also, she speaks to the shifting of the Indigenous Peoples Project, which for the most of the past 500 years has had one major priority: survival. Now it has shifted to self-determination. I carry this thinking about what is the new major priority. Other people that I draw on include Sean Wilson and Margaret Kovac. Sean Wilson discusses the Indigenous research paradigm as being composed of four entities: ontology, the theory of nature of existence; epistemology, study of the nature of thinking or knowing; axiology, ethics that guide the search for knowledge and judge which information is worthy of searching for; and methodology, theory of how knowledge is gained. The four elements are in a circle, which speaks to the relationality of Indigenous research and conveys accountability and validity. Margaret Kovac articulates herself in relationship to her tribally centered framework that draws from the Cree knowledge of her people, which incorporates protocols, languages, and ancestral knowledge into her research. However, she questions how much to share without sharing too much as an ethical consideration of Indigenous research. Situating at Ganyakahaga. On the left, you can see the historical extent of the Haudenosaunee territory. Here is akwesasne, where I am from. And as you can see, it's pretty complex, and I have to negotiate this business on a regular basis. The Ganyakahaga paradigm. Taiaige Alfred, in Peace, Power, and Righteousness, utilizes the condolence ceremony to critique Indigenous leaders and politics. He does not situate the ceremony in his writing as direct reflection, nor confirms to academia. This is a means of respecting the sacredness of the ceremony. However, it forms a great theoretical basis for his critique. Audra Simpson and Mohawk Interruptus utilize a method of refusal and interviewing, which is a means of protecting our people and their knowledge. Amber McDonald presented The Woman Who Seeded Earth, Haudenosaunee Ecology, to create a conversation at the intersection of our creation story and ecological succession. It is through her exploration of our language that she's able to unpack the complexity of the creation story and its relationship with ecological succession. Now, the akwesasne paradigm, where I'm from, and I'm going to contribute to. James Ransom and Craig Ettinger in 2001 calls out collaborative institutions for not engaging with Indigenous knowledge and values, and the way scientific validation interpretation often removes local knowledge from its context. The creation of memorandum of agreement or other instruments is akin to taking out the kaswenta and polishing it. This is grounded in the three principles of Goa, which I shared with you earlier. These relationships can be reached through the common interest of protecting the environment, This relationship must be characterized by the preservation of traditional knowledge and its wider application, meaningful engagement, and cultural sensitivity training for non-Indigenous partners. Holistic, risk-based environmental decision-making, a Native perspective, seeks to incorporate an Indigenous context into risk assessment and risk management processes and decision-making. Our attention is drawn to address the physical, social, and cultural determinants of health, to which the health of the natural world is essential. This is justified within akwesasne's context by drawing on the language, which we clearly find a cultural philosophy that is relational, integrated, holistic, and female-focused. Anthony M. David, who received his master's from the Natural Resources Department at Cornell, in his thesis, A Comprehensive Risk Framework Highlighting Risk Cascades Presented to the Mohawk of Akwesasne, draws from the Haudenosaunee paradigm to the exploration of Ugahu Neha, or Indian way of life, in relation to critiquing risk frameworks. This is seen in his critique of the natural resource damage assessment at the Superfund remediation site adjacent to Akwesasne, which did not properly engage the health and cultural implications on fishing, which is a huge part of identity in Akwesasne. Now, for my academic paradigm, I approach this section with a good mind and seek to find peace with the academic paradigm within the context of my research and draw power from this understanding. Respect is paramount in this conversation. These are some of the methodologies that I draw from that I do not have the time in this presentation to explore. However, these are the sources that help negotiate this third space and develop ropes of co-creation. For me, I look at qualitative research designs by Maxwell and Luttrell, mixed methods, qualitative and quantitative research by Maxwell and Miriam and Tisdale, interviewing by Seidman, and coding by Saldana. And what I used was substantive coding, in vivo coding, open coding, memoing, all that good stuff to find and understand the interviews. We're an oral people. So that's why qualitative works so well with us. Now, I will delve into other things later, as well as grounded theory by Creswell and Poth. And then from my own mentor, Dr. Karim Ali Qassam, human ecological research. Dr. Karim Ali Qassam provided the connection for my work. He has a framework for engagement that helps in the provision of respect and reciprocity for Indigenous ways of knowing. It seeks to engage with the communities concerned and through research and validate the results with the community, which are translated in academic articles and a product for the community to use. My Akwesasne identity. I love this quote by Jake Thomas. I don't even know where it's from. I know I've seen it on a plaque somewhere and I can't even find it again, but there are no experts in Iroquois culture. When we come together, we say that we put our minds on the table. That way, if you have knowledge that I can use, I can borrow it. And if I have knowledge you can use, you can borrow it. We always have something to learn. This quote is meant to show my interpretation of my culture to be a valuable one. My Akwesasne identity is a generative source of inspiration and knowledge for my work. These are the teachings that are very informative to me. 7 generations, which in my culture is expressed as the coming faces of future generations are looking up at us from the land. It's a little bit of a nuanced difference. And for me, that really emphasizes the diversity of Indigenous communities' relationships with lands and our expressions of our relationality. The Thanksgiving address, which outlines our kinship relationships with all of creation and the roles and responsibilities we have to each other. And then the foundational principles of the Guyana Lagoa, peace, power, and a good mind. These are the ways that you can negotiate a healthy relationship, whether it's with yourself, with another person, even politically on a nation-to-nation level. These are really powerful, powerful teachings. And traditional stories like the creation story. the origin of man, the origin of ceremonies, and history of clans. These stories that speak to the way that we are connected to this landscape, and these are embodied in our traditional practices and the ways that we can make ourselves stronger and healthier. For forest stewardship, I tied this entire conversation together with this one example from my research, which is my approach to conceptualizing my people's values in relationship to the forest. This was inspired by a poem by Joy Harjo, poet laureate, that states, "You might try dancing theory with a bustle or a jingle dress, or with turtles strapped around your legs." This inspired me to think about the ways that I engage with grounded theory, or try to find Jinigualihodo, or our ways, in relation to forest stewardship. Additionally, I look at the way that I can inform my coding strategy of interviews from my akwesasne paradigm. It allows me to see things that others would miss. Also, it is grounded in refusal, as I recognize that some of the knowledge I gain for my community is not for the public or research community. Thus, the products of my work are twofold. I believe that I'm producing a body of work that is valuable to academic circles, which I'm not very concerned with, to be honest. And I'm actively engaging in the knowledge production and maintenance of my people. The things that are redacted from my analysis are now my responsibility to carry. I must protect this knowledge and share it with future generations of akwesasne. To see the Kaswenta as a framework of negotiating collaboration, I can take tools from each paradigm in a respectful way and address a problem together. Currently, I hold one end of the rope of co-creation, and my collaborators, my non-Indigenous collaborators, hold the other end. And they understand that this is something that is about being in a meaningful relationship, is about, because what I really like about it is I can let go of that rope and they can let go of the rope. So I think there's a way that we are both respecting each other's time and space and each other, that it doesn't just offset those pieces. So in closing, I hope this helps other Haudenosaunee students or other Indigenous students find balance in academia. Also, it may inspire the people in this room to think about the way they approach their interactions and research with Indigenous communities. Remember, we are in a period of critical resurgence. This is not the comfortable kind that fits neatly into academia. It seeks justice for the trauma left on our bodies and the land by colonialism. And it is still dealing with the manifestations within our communities. Through knowledge and understanding, both Indigenous and academic, we engage hope together. And my ending note, there are those who will see this as an expression of the complex system of Anishinaabeg intelligence, as theory or intellect, or as a valid form of knowledge production. I will not apologize for this, or qualify this, or defend this, nor will I write this book in a way that might be more palatable to whiteness. There are those who will therefore position this work not as theory or an academic contribution, but as a soft intellectual work or narrative or creative nonfiction. And that's an excerpt from Leanne Simpson's book, As We Have Always Done. And I just love that. This unapologetic rejection of the hierarchy that tries to exert itself on us. And for me, I don't need academia. If you want to work with me, then let's work together. But I'm not going to go beg you to work with me. And that's just how I approach these relationships. We are there for each other, but I'm not going to beg you. I'm not going to kowtow to you. I like to remind my collaborators pretty often that Indigenous science does not owe academia anything. We don't owe validation. We don't owe knowledge. And we're not going to unless this relationship is healthy. So with all of that said, thank you and tukniko. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And so now we can work into a period of questions for folks. I hope you enjoyed that. I had a good time.
I'm going to interrupt here and say I wish that I had a heart emoticon because I would have been putting it out. I think a lot of people probably felt that way. I'll pull myself back here. Oh. And just since you mentioned questions, Abraham, I'll just highlight to everyone in the audience that we do have the Q&A function here. If there are any questions from you that you'd like to pose to Abraham following that presentation.
No question from me, just a comment. I just want to say that you are a true warrior, Abe. I love your spirit. I love what you stand for, and I love what you've shared with us.
Oh, no. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Like, I am opening myself up to this opportunity for folks, even if you feel like it's not, even if you feel like your question isn't great or whatever, I don't do that. So if you even have weird questions, I'm here. And yeah.
I see that there's a lot of positive comments in the chat. No questions by Miigwech, lots of Miigwech. Thank you for sharing. That was an amazing presentation. And I imagine there may be others out there who are also still processing much of what you said, because as usual, whenever you give a talk, there's always layers to what you've been saying. And so there's a lot to unpack, digest, and think about when it comes to making a question. It's a good thing.
Oh my gosh. I hope to finish this paper at some point.
So awesome.
Please send it to us when you do.
Yes. I know.
So, oh, Marilyn has a question.
Well, for an old girl's eyes, you made me cry. Just to watch you go through your life and what I know in the last 4 or 5 years of you, sitting and watching you. And as an old granny, it just fills my heart up, lots of it. So much it's up to here. Seeing you grow up, gentleness and your inclusiveness. You're a beautiful, beautiful spirit in my eyes. You make me feel really good. You're the first young person that I've ever heard talk about the animals being scientists. The very first that I've heard. And I congratulate you that you recognize that. So when you go forward and your paper, I'm going to tell you something, it'll never be done. You'll be 90 years old and you'll still be writing that paper because it'll be so intense all through your life. What a gift. So never look to finish it because it doesn't happen. But to acknowledge the animals, you know, when we make our relationships with the non-Indigenous people wanting to learn. And they're so, you know, I'm sorry sometimes that they're so captured in the learning of a book, where for us, we have that privilege, that relationship in our ancestral people, that we recognize the value and the importance of the animals, the water ones, the plants, the winged ones. And when you talk about scientists in our animal kingdom, I look to what the beaver has to tell us. That's the engineer of the pond. Not only does it provide that life for them in that beautiful circle of that dam, the complexity of it for a little animal, and how much manpower it would take. We'd still be out there trying to build the first rocks that went across to hold us above, but they can do that in a day or two. So I'm going to say thank you for your gifts, and I'm anxious to see where your next 4 or 5 years are. And also for mentioning our old colleagues, Jim Ransom and Henry. It's nice to hear them in your journey of speak. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. I really appreciate that. So I have a question. And the question is, do you think the scientific community is accepting of your style of research? I mean, I'm not really interested in whether the scientific community is interested in my style of research. I'll be honest with you, like I'm not looking for validation. But what I will say is that actually, interestingly enough, I haven't really been confronted with many with much opposition. Instead, I've been invited in to learn about these things, to share, to negotiate these relationships, to grow this, because a lot of researchers do want to work with Indigenous people. But communicating across this boundary and finding commonality, finding ways to communicate has been really difficult. You know, like I am extending an olive branch in a lot of respects, for a lot of situations that I'm taking the time to do this and open myself up. Because I will say, like, I don't owe that to anyone, but I am taking the time to move this conversation forward and teach people and open up those conversations. And I just know there's a lot of researchers out there that are trying to figure out how to work best. And so research that I accomplished, so many years ago has been really, really valuable and relevant to the work that I'm doing. And so I'm really grateful to people like Carol Warrior that really shaped my thinking, to Henry Lickers that started this journey for me and opened my mind to the ways that we can bring our culture into science. He just described this multidimensional world based on the Hontakalawadekwa, the Guyana Lagoa, and systems of biological systems of scale. And I love that. I loved that moment, and it was great. And I feel like I'm adding my own little spice to this process. And I think I'm kind of surprising to some folks, specifically in the scientific field, because I feel like they expect certain things from me when they're working with an Indigenous community. And I've been disrespected quite often, but I have a particular way of clapping back at folks. Reminding them that I am a scientist. I'm a well-trained scientist. You are not going to sit there and use language that I won't be able to participate in. You aren't going to throw models up and not expect me to interrogate the assumptions on what you're making. I definitely surprise folks in that respect. And oftentimes I will find out that some people have no idea what they're doing. I will interrogate people and push their boundaries to figure out, are they doing meaningful engagement, or are they just trying to add a feather to their research project to make it that much sexier for the grantor or for where they're trying to apply for funds? And I've rejected plenty of proposals when they haven't built the relationship with me. But for people that have built a relationship with me, I will write you a letter of support the day of. I will read, I will write, I will do so much for you if you build that meaningful relationship with me. And so a lot of it has been this careful negotiation, but also recognizing that I carry privilege, and that the position I'm in is that they mess with me and they hurt me. They destroy any research opportunities with akwesasne. But let's put that into context, right? It's not just akwesasne. Remember, Indigenous people speak to each other. We have this really beautiful network. If we don't like a research researcher, trust me, news will get around and we'll talk about it all damn day. And so any opportunities to work with Indigenous people will be quickly squashed. So I'm slowly learning. I'm still growing as a researcher. A lot of my work focused on the qualitative bit, and I'm very much a mixed methods approach to research. And right now, I think where I'm really opening up is the quantitative bit. There's been really amazing work done by Andrea Reed at UBC in the field of fisheries. And I'm looking to like sort of converse with her and open up my own dimension of it, develop something that is crossing that boundary, is taking into community-based research. And how are we forming our assumptions in statistical analysis? How are we building our models? Is there a potential for Bayesian analysis to be incorporated into our model building for populations that is informed by our traditional stories, our knowledge of the land, and how it's changed across time? So that's where I'm sitting currently. I'm sitting in a position of like power. At least apparently, like, I mean, look, my people like think I'm the goofiest person ever. And, you know, like I'm really about communicating science in a way that is accessible to them. So when I talk about the importance of wetlands, I talk about the importance of medicines and the importance of my grandmother connected to those wetlands and what it's going to mean for me to protect those and make sure that those medicines are available for future generations, and so on and so on and so on. There's so much that we can do, and there's so much to do. So as Marilyn said, I am going to keep working and probably be like Henry Lickers and Larry and just work forever. I see you, Larry. So this is my heart on my sleeve, and it's been pretty well received. And, you know, even within the scientific community, the idea of objectivity within modern science is starting to be rejected. We're starting to work into a new sort of paradigm of postmodern science. And if you want to get into it, we can talk about positivism and post-positivism, and let's get into some post-positivism and, you know, all of that good stuff. I'm not as good in that language as I used to be, but you know what? I still remember the nice words. So if there's any additional questions, we've got like 3 minutes before we before we take a little 10-minute break to get some water or something.
If nobody else has a question, I have a question. So I loved when you kind of like put emphasis on the fact that it really is like Indigenous science, and even kind of calling it Indigenous knowledge or placing it like in that kind of box may take away like the validity, you know, and significance of Indigenous people's science. So I really love that you emphasized how important like language is around speaking about these things. So I was going to ask, is there, I guess, especially in the traditional ecological knowledge or traditional knowledge kind of sphere overall, is there any kind of particular language that you feel is really important to get across to non-Indigenous folks?
I think like the thing that I challenge every academic that enters into the space with me is, what brought you here and why do you care? So I usually ask people to write their positionality when they enter into a research partnership with me. And this is just a reflection on who you are, where you come from, the way you think, where it come from, and then how is that manifested in your research? Because we can see these little pieces of biases that can come through. But also like rejecting the notion of objectivity and that subjectivity is the enemy. And I try to be as careful as possible. Like when I talk about like traditional knowledge and you know, like Indigenous science, these kinds of things, I try to bring it back to my people. in my community. I'm interested, and that's why I took that right to the akwesasne paradigm and the akwesasne way of understanding these things, because it's right here in akwesasne that we've developed these relationships over thousands of years. And we've understood this landscape. We've seen the ebb and the flow, and we understand how things are changing. Now, how to reach into that and embody that in the work is still a challenge. There's a lot of work that's being done as we move forward, but I think oftentimes what an academic researcher needs to understand is like rejecting this idea of professionalism. Like, you know, like, I mean, like, I don't know, I have a mixed bag of relationships with that, because like, yeah, we have to be professional, you know, but is that like, we can't create that like relationship with people. So sometimes in the beginning of meetings, I'll just ask people like, how's your heart today? And, you know, sometimes like a research conversation that was supposed to be focused on one thing will just be a moment to like let it out, to feel where you're at. And so that's what a research partnership looks like for me. And that's what I'm kind of cultivating and growing with a lot of people around me. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, like, I'm a dirty res kid. I grew up here. I had never thought in a million years I would be doing what I'm doing and that people would be listening to me and find significance in the work I do. I am just me. And I am, you know, even there, I was like a Mohawk man, right? Like, I'm queer. I am queer as, you know, as can be. And I love that about me, because my name Tehulunhyapte translates to, it describes the color of the sky just before the sun comes up. And I think about my role in the middle, like in sort of negotiating this relationship with academia and community. I negotiate this relationship across men and women, you know, like two-spiritedness and like two-spirit identity for me is just this space that's in the middle, and not really in the middle, but able to go across and back and forth and find, you know, the language to communicate across those boundaries. And that's where I find celebration with myself and love for myself, and I embody it in my work. And I mean, when you think about it, right, the practice of ecology and the field of environmental science is hella queer. And I just love that, you know, bringing that into conversations. I don't know. I guess it's just like, be yourself. And it's not like a free for all to be, you know, a terrible person though, you know, like, oh, I'm just mean or straightforward or honest. Like, you still have to be nice and kind and supportive of people with also reinforcing your boundaries. So it looks like we have one more question, and I'll answer this one quickly so we have a little bit of a break. And so the question here, with the boundaries of the scientific research institution, specifically the funding cycle, it can be difficult for research to take the time / have the funding for relationship building portion. How do you see this changing? I mean, I don't limit it to like funding. Like, we go after funding after we've built the relationship. If you're just interested in a project with me to get funding, then I'm not interested in this partnership. If it's only about money for this group, then that's not what I'm after. And so like on the other side of this is like sharing the funds. Like, I can get funds and I share that with my collaborators, and they can get funds and they share that with me. And so it's through this collective impact idea that we're able to address these really complex issues, and we're able to get funds, and we're able to support each other, and we're able to spread out the labor that's necessary. So for me, it's a priority thing. If you want to build a meaningful relationship with me, don't make it about funding. Don't make it about like when you're going to get funding, because trust me, we will get funding. I'm pretty good at getting some money for this place and getting my grants supported, okay? But, you know, it's also like reminding people that I'm not interested in just making some money, and that they shouldn't be interested in operating from that place either. So that's kind of what I have to share with that piece of the Q&A. And that this can change, and I think it hopefully will change in the future, but obviously we're stuck in this industrial grant cycle and our industrial grant complex, which in itself carries so many problems for all the folks in here that have written grants and understand grants and have tried to like support programs with them. It's a lot. So I have a lot to say about that, but you know, that's a different conversation. So I'm going to release you guys for 10 minutes, okay? And we'll be back at 8:05, and then we'll jump into our panel, okay?
See you shortly.
Well, thank you everyone for this time. And I think my little piece of advice for everyone is to remember that you are enough. This colonial system that we live in tries to convince you that you aren't. And it capitalizes on that, whether it be hustle culture or it be this idea that you have to fit into some idea of what you're supposed to be. Because this was the greatest lesson I was given by one of my now gone mentors. I love her with all my heart, and I wish she was still here. And I still see her all over my work. But what she always emphasized was you are enough, despite what the world tries to tell you. And so hold on to that and remember that when you're in spaces and people try you, that you do have the opportunity to clap back. And so with that, I think we will close this space. It is sweet. I appreciate everyone that stuck it out with us for as long as we've been here. And who will be closing for us today? Larry or our wonderful Marilyn?
I think we should both close with a, what are you doing, flapping your hands in the air? I'll go first, but you're going to get in here too. That's all I can say. I would put my camera on, but I kind of look like Captain Cook right now. I have an arthritic eye, and with so much screen time, I've got a patch on it right now. So left eye, Captain Cook style. I want to acknowledge the good spirits that came and sat with us tonight. They answered the call of the medicine that was put out there. And all the things that you talked about doesn't disappear. As I listened to you, I closed my eyes and just saw a slideshow of my own life. All of those challenges that you've had in your little time here, getting to be elders. That's where you're going. It doesn't go backwards, it goes forwards. However, I rest assure you that we might be older, but our spirits are young. They're still full of energy. My children who are in their 50s, I tell them I'm only 35, so don't bother me. But I imagined in my slideshows of memory tonight a different time for me more than 50 years ago of the same things that you're talking about this evening. And you do that so eloquently. It was a pleasure to listen. The traumas that you're talking about in terms of having to stand up for yourself, Michelle, Miss Larry, and I had the same opportunity to do that this afternoon. But you young people are going to be the voices of the gifts that have come from people of our age group and the ones before us. You just change places with responsibility. And your ideal and your courage is just tremendous. Those are the gifts for praying, talking to the land, talking to your people, and the kindness of what you can do today. You just keep yourself strong. And I know that this is closing evening, but that's just the program. That isn't us together in the forever. And like I said, I've watched most of you for a long time. And it's just like looking at my grandchildren, how proud Granny looks when, your kids do. So I'd like to close my portion in thanking the water spirits, Nibi. The signs of the land are talking to us now. And as I live on the Great Lakes, we are listening to the first call of the drum. And I call it Igadon Kun, the voice of the water drums under the thunder, like they sound like thunder under the water. They travel like that. And they come from the big Great Lakes, like the open lakes. The water pressure as it's breaking up out there, and it just goes like waves. So by the time it gets to shore, they're really speaking. It is awesome. And Ice Woman is beginning to open herself, her water bundle. And the beauty and intensity of the pressure cracks, they're never two the same. The interesting thing this year is that the pressure cracks, the ice that is coming up, is crystal clear. I haven't seen that for a long time. So something is working right. So my friend Bev, who left us last summer, her closing didn't matter if it was text or telephone. She had these words to celebrate with each and every one. Love you lots. Always will. Miigwech. And I pass the feather to Michelle Miss Larry.
I had to check to make sure it wasn't on mute. Chimigwech, Marilyn. And Chimigwech to all of you, and your beautiful and strong words this evening. It made me relive going to university several decades ago. But I do remember then that there were a few Indigenous people had gone before me and broke ground. Different areas. I remember in particular doing my thesis, dealing with ethics that was so weird because it didn't understand Indigenous knowledge transfer systems. And so I had to get all these strange permissions in a Western academic paradigm that was in conflict with what I experienced in my own community. And so when I went to my elders, they kind of looked at me like, what? But actually, they're very compassionate and helped me through. So I enjoyed hearing some of the stories that you shared and spoke so well. I too, so Chloe's journey of going through academia, but then coming back to the land is not unlike my own. And I have the great good fortune of living out on the land. Today I walked back and forth from my office. And at one point, I'm looking at all the deer tracks that are crossing the driveway that I'm walking home on. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of deer. Well, those lot of deer were watching me. And I just caught one out of the corner of my eye. And then I realized there was two. And then I realized there was four. And then there and more. And they're so beautiful and healthy, Awakeshi in our language. And they're always so athletic, so graceful. On Saturday, we saw several eagles. There was probably a wolf kill not far away, and but we can I'm grateful that our life givers, our brothers and sisters of many other species, are making it through the winter. They're doing okay. They're doing good. In these troubled times, it's good to see that our close relatives are doing well. At one point, we talked about things that are challenging, even depressing. We talked about climate change, and I'm thinking about elder faith keeper Oren Lyon, and a beautiful film that a friend of mine from Six Nations organized and showed staff last week. And one of the things that Oren concludes, a very, very truthful analysis of the world we're in and what we must do. But he wraps it up with never take away the people's hope. And I felt that I heard that from you, from all of you, that we shouldn't, that maintaining that hope, that having fun, being creative, finding, listening to our ancestors, listening to our spirit within, was so refreshing and encouraging to hear the wisdom that I heard tonight in this circle. And so I say Chimigwech to all of you for sharing that wisdom. And like Marilyn said, our bodies age, but our spirits are always young. And so you gave this old guy a shot of hope today, knowing that as we slowly pass on the baton, Marilyn and I, to you who take on the roles of leadership as you're already doing. We know that I said baton, but really it's the feather, it's the spirit bundle. And when you take on that bundle, you give us confidence that that life will continue in a good way, and that strength that was given to us at the point of conception, that you understand, that you know how to nurture it, and the world is in good hands with the next generation, is how I feel tonight. And so I say, I want to say Chimiwich to all of you, and I will in a second, but I wanted to say one other thing, because Marilyn called upon and honored the spirit of Nibi. I want to call upon and honor Ishkode, the fire, and recognize that the Thunderbirds will come soon, and that sacred fire is so important for anchoring our relationships, our ceremonies, and reminding us of that sacred transition, that cyclical part of life, and how we have to feed that at all times to keep it going. that's our sacred responsibility, all of us, to commit ourselves to the continuation of life. And so I will say, Chimigwech, go safely, and Chimigwech for allowing me to be part of this circle tonight.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you, Larry and Marilyn, for those words. And I hope everyone has a wonderful night. Get some rest. Thank you for holding in here as long as you have. And onagiwahe.
Miigwech, everyone. Thank you so much. Meowin.